I did an overnight camp on Australia's the continent of Australia's tallest mountain. It's called Mount Kosciuszko. It's not as tall as it sounds relative to other continents. But that was in winter, and mind you, Australian winter is much milder. So that was a recent adventure, I guess.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
It would you say that you kind of are drawn to kind of an endurance strength uh events or excursions like that? Like, because it sounds like, I mean, you didn't go to the second tallest or the third tallest. You went to the tallest in Australia. I don't know if that's something that you always feel like you're very compelled to do.
Again, I think it ties back to how you said, how's your day or how's your weekend? It's more what the it's more what pulls me, if that makes sense, or what I pull. It's a matter of I believe a lot in Nikola Tesla's statement of life can be measured in frequencies, energy, vibrations, in no particular order. And I'd say mountains and oceans, sunsets, sunrises, those are places where I feel the most energy. And that can be misinterpreted very well. But I believe I feel a pull, yeah, towards mountains. And it doesn't have to be the tallest mountain. It could be a little hill. Yeah. But I could be very wrong with my antenna or my perception of energy. But I think I'm trying to cultivate better practices
Yeah.
so I'm more attuned.
And I know that you're very uh you or use a lot of care in the way that you discuss energies and not trying to associate labels to things, good or bad or anything like that. But if it's possible, I was curious, like, if you could distinguish the types of energies that you're drawn to. I'm curious if, like, mountains have a grounding energy, or if they have an intensity of energy, or if they just have this. You don't really you don't really have a word for it. It's just kind of, you feel pulled to it, or you want to pull it into your life more, and you just feel more fulfilled in when you're engaging with a mountain, or a sunset, or something like that.
I think this comes down to what the terminal end goal of all things are for my life. And for me, and I feel like a lot of people, not to put words into their mouth, but it's to look for peace and to feel a sense of peace. And again, that comes down to what we practice. And I'd say that's where things like mountains come in. It's not about having an intense or calming energy or whatnot. I think it's a matter of practice. And for some reason, I'm starting to believe more in code matches. So if I'm seeking something and there's an answer, there's a problem and there's a solution. I'm trying to find how to match the two together. I don't know. Have you ever played those games where it's like, let's say you put a bunch of cards face down, and your goal is to find matching cards and pair them together? It feels like that, and you're not allowed to reverse all the cards. So you can see all the cards face up, but it's finding it, okay, putting it down, remembering what that was, and then, I remember that card was around here somewhere, and then you match it together. But that feels like how life is at the moment for me,
Yeah.
matching. Mm.
And is that something that you are feeling game for, like, as far as this shift in perspective into this sort of matching? Like, are you kind of like, well, I'm up for finding these matches. I'm up for finding. I can recognize the problem, so to speak, and I can meet that. Now that's something that I can more or less approach with some degree of enthusiasm or something like that. Or is this something that's become kind of a far different way that you've been living your life previously?
Very different, I'd say. Very different. Um, and but it's because of that past that makes our present. So there's definitely a constant back and forth. And I think the easiest, most sentimentally and widely understood diagram would be that yin and yang. You get it's always there's no perfect balance, but it's the strive and the consistent practice to seek that balance, whether it's in the micro, meso, or macro picture. Yeah.
Yeah. And on that, it's something that I reflect on almost every time that someone brings up a yin and yang diagram or image, and that is something that I don't know if it's entirely accurate with the representation of the image itself, or the significance of the meaning itself of the image itself. But I learned that the yin and yang aren't stagnant; they move.
Mm.
They're kind of intended to rotate, and these fish are supposed to be
Yes.
kind of chasing each other, and that just kind of like opened up something really major for me, because like usually you see it at a store or online just like as a
Yep.
still
It's
image.
still, yeah.
Yeah, yeah, but it's not.
No, that's very true. It's not. It's constantly chasing each other. And sometimes I can't imagine it be chasing each other at one speed. I would imagine realistically, sometimes it'll move faster, sometimes it might stop. What if, what happens when they catch each other?
This is the game begin again, Yeah. Uh,
Yeah, I guess so.
and I know that I mean, in addition to your association with Shingon, I know that you're also you're someone that is creative. I mean, you're someone that is a writer and an active reader and things like that. I mean, have you been finding uh, some grounding or some kind of help along the way as you go along, matching like in the things that you read and as you process and reflect and as you write?
Um, so I'm trying to understand the question. So you're saying, I guess everything that I'm doing is hopefully coming onto this one continuum, and reading, being creative, writing, all those things, as well as Buddhist practices. Everything that I do is hopefully trying to find that continuum. Um, I guess if we bring it back to the yin and yang, the fish are going along that route, not, going all over the place. I think reading is something, and writing, all of these are helping me stay balanced in my own way. Um, Before I used to search too hard, but nowadays I'm trying to balance it more with what I'm attracting. So let's say I've got a pile of 20 books to read. I wouldn't be as I used to, oh, you know what, I'm going to read this book to X page or whatnot and be so calculated. It's more, when is that book reaching out to me more? The circumstances in my life at that time, which book reaches out to me the most. That's usually how I would take what I do more. Even with my writing, it's not so much this is the day to do it. It's more, when does it feel most um, right. So again, going back to that antenna, but that's
Yeah,
got to be carefully balanced.
right. Right, because you might fall into like a non-committed kind of
Yeah.
engagement with your reading and writing, where it's like, well, nothing will get done if you just kind of are always uh, not fully tethered or committed to something. Um,
Yep.
but I definitely feel the opposite being true, where being fully tethered too much or fully committed too much. Like I've definitely been uh, you know, quote unquote, kind of stuck in a very long book. It's like I gotta finish it. I've started it, and I have to give myself credit for closing the book and saying I've done it. Where it's like, well,
Mm,
life is too short to and no one's keeping a tally. You're not getting a score at the end of this for how many books you read every word of. But I feel that kind of that intensity to want to like have that completion element done.
mm,
Whereas I really
mm,
admire your approach, where you will have 20 books, and maybe this month this book will draw you, and you can read this or that page of it or this or that chapter of it, and see how it goes, and see
mm.
how it influences your life.
So I'm having an issue with this recently, and it comes down to fundamentally this East versus West, I guess, dynamics. And the part of that is, see, I'm Japanese background, and I like to think I was raised in a very traditional, conservative Japanese. upbringing and the way that the Japanese, their ethos with things is you should finish things to its entirety. So, for example, like in Japan, people are focused on mastery. And I hear this saying, don't be a jack of all trades, be a master of one, or vice versa. And the Japanese try to master one thing, whether it be cleaning something, or whether it be making tofu, or whether it be um, acting or martial arts or whatever. It's pick one thing and master, go deep, go really deep into it. And yet here in the West, I think it's kind of reversed. It's we should find what we like by drawing a wide range of things, sort of scratching on the surface. Um, yeah, so I find this really strange dynamic, and trying to optimize that is one of my big goals. How do we create a good synthesis of both, taking good of what's both or bad, for lack of a better word?
Yeah.
Yeah.
What when you were growing up, was there something that you felt drawn to master the most? I mean, like if you were kind of growing up in that kind of completion, one lane kind of environment,
Mm.
did one lane kind of appear for you the most?
Not at all. It's actually the opposite because the upbringing was so different to my surroundings. As soon as I step out of the house and I enter the out greater world, it's things were moving at an almost opposite synchronicity to what I was used to. So I would feel confused. And again, this is a thing called language ego. It's like two versions within myself colliding, colliding, colliding. And it's taken a long time to make sense of that and to act accordingly.
Yeah.
So no, I didn't have any call or nothing. It was more the opposite. Like, how do I sync with the rest of the world?
Yeah. Well, and it does seem that this effort that you have towards uh synergizing elements of your life, but also of your temple community and your martial arts schooling, and also just creative writing and education. You're kind of, I mean, I don't know all of the elements that are going into what your work is, but it seems like four or five more or less, uh, quote unquote, distinct uh, elements of some of your life, but also of activity are coming together in
Mm.
you, and then in also what you offer to the general public or to kids, because I think you mostly your focus is working within uh kind of youth education. Is that right?
Generally, I used to
Mm.
say, build strong children so we can minimize fixing broken adults, but then I felt that was a bit too limiting. So now the mantra is a bit different. Just build strong people with soft hearts and sharp minds. So
Mhm.
I'd like to say, yeah, 60% of the focus will be on the youth, but I'd say 40% is also on everyone else.
Yeah, yeah. And what has your experience been like as far as leading or like influence bringing in martial arts into your approach into creating these sharp minds with soft hearts?
Uh, I think in the East, martial arts is more integrated into day-to-day life, and it's not so, well, for lack of better term, privatized. It's kind of brought into, say, political discourse more rather than just as little fragments. So I want to integrate martial arts more into day to day, not to the point of, I guess, what we see now with, mixed martial arts, glory, UFC, all this blood sport so much, but more so it's the fundamental values of it, without any deification on anyone or no scripture so much, just the fundamental practices of being a calm, collected, hardworking, consistent, and disciplined person.
Yeah. And that is, it really has become such a major trend, the UFC,
Yep.
the glorification of individuals in their bouts, in their fighting, and there's certain names that get certain sponsorships and all this sort of thing. And it's a hyper competitive environment, but
Mm.
and I speak from like really no experience or watching it or really participating whatsoever, but uh, the the sports like the competitive spirit and the art spirit, the martial art spirit of it does seem like it goes by the wayside for more of the entertainment value. Um,
Mm.
but that's from me as a very casual observer. I don't speak for everybody, but is that kind of your estimation as well, just as someone that's engaged with the martial art community?
I'd say yes and no. I think a big part of it is what's the root essence of such behavior. And I think it comes down to ultimately, and I could be very wrong here, but could be to make a living. At some point, it becomes, wow, this is a way that I could live, support myself financially, and support the people around me financially. And I feel that comes into a lot of departments in Australia. For all I could say is really for Australia, but education, um, welfare, um, medical. A lot of this is coming down to ultimately what's the dollar figure? How much am I pocketing at the end of the day? And that's snowballing across to everything, day-to-day practices, how we fundamentally think. Yeah.
And that kind of more or less can drive something more into the entertainment world, or it also can deepen a passion, right? I mean, then if you're saying like, well, maybe I can make this my life, and then they go ahead and maybe that's an enriching experience if they go about
Mm.
it that way. So yeah, no, that's a uh I do see what you're saying. That's kind of like capitalistic kind of draw that people are experiencing, and balance that they're towing with their interests, and then but also
Mm.
to maybe sacrificing some elements to make that dollar or whatever it is as a part of their thing. But and that being something that's felt in multiple arenas.
Yep.
So yeah, no, I feel that. And then what are some things that are first and foremost when you're instructing someone in martial arts, like if for a beginner, like philosophy wise, like what are some questions that you get, and what are some kind of fundamental things that you like to share at the beginning when people are getting started?
Mm. That's a good one. Uh, I think these days, the most important thing I look at sharing, the focus is how you practice the most basic first things, like the foundation setting activities, disposition. A lot of people want to, let's just go straight into hyperboles here, jumping, doing all these crazy things, winning fights, getting up the ranks in grades, tournaments, etc. But it starts with fundamentally, how do you stand, for example? A lot of people when they first stand in Japan, at least, it's like you want to start off with your feet at shoulder or hip width apart. If you fail to understand this and you think this is okay, this is not feet shoulder width apart, or it's not parallel. This is. So if you deviate here, you will deviate in all other aspects of your life. So little things like this, how you breathe. If you're not breathing correctly and you think, oh no, 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 it's okay, I know how to breathe, it would snowball into every other practice, regardless of whether it's connected directly to martial arts or not. How you drive, how you brush your teeth, how you think about other people, how you work in your workplace, all those things. So it starts off with the most fundamental practices of day to day, how you breathe, how you think, things like that. That's what I'm more focusing as a martial arts when I put on the hat of a martial arts coach these days. Yeah.
Yeah, and do you find that you try to kind of take the martial art component of having yourself aligned in more ways than one as you go and drive and brush your teeth and do all those things? Like, do you find yourself like using that kind of focus to do your day to day within the umbrella of martial arts, or do you see some weaving of a Buddhist practice also within it, or is there kind of it's not even distinguishable? It's just kind of like this is what life is, and this is how to best do this to have a fulfilled experience with it.
When going back to what we were saying about it all coming together onto one plane, I think the walls start blurring between, say, Buddhist practices, martial arts practices, as a teacher's practice, or, as just a friend or anyone. I think the practices, the walls start blurring, which is a good and a bad thing at the same time. Um, but there's yeah, as mentioned, there's always a lot of similarities that I'm finding. You and I, we've just met online for the first time, and but there are inherent similarities and there are inherent differences. And which do we choose to focus on? Could be a big question to everyone, really.
Yeah, and then yet we can also see the blurring quality of it, like what you're saying, where here we are, two people communicating, and there you can
Yep,
go down the wormhole of like, well, I'm based in the United States, you're based in Australia, and so on and so forth, and like
yep.
keep breaking down the differences. But also too, here we are, two people connecting about life or whatever it is and communicating, and that can sound simple, but it can be quite profound. Um,
Mm,
and with your with just like specifically with your relationship with Koyasan Seizanji Temple, uh, because I know that within the framework of that temple, martial arts is woven in to the practice, or like, or at least is within the function of the temple.
mm,
Is that right to say?
hmm. Yep, yes, yeah.
Yeah. Is that unique to Shingon? I mean, are a lot of Shingon, like from what your understanding of how Shingon and Koyasan temples are set up, is martial arts something that is interwoven internationally?
No, I wouldn't say so. The general prototype, I'd say no. Um, uh, my father, and he founded the temple. He came as a martial artist fundamentally. So the chicken or the egg, he came off as the martial artist first. And it was only until in his 50s he felt he needed something more than martial arts. And he found that the martial arts that he was delving deep into had a strong connection with Shingon Buddhism practices, particularly the Kujikiri aspects. So, in terms of energy and manifesting energy, so he found a code match in that, and that's why he began the practice of Buddhism. So, and I think the apple doesn't fall far from the tree. It always things happen from the leader, and it follows down to everyone following. So, I think he's created a really unique ecosystem environment here where martial arts is setting the tone for Shingon Buddhism. However, in back in Japan, in headquarters in Wakayama, the Socho, he also has a strong tie with martial arts. So I think it's dependent on the quirks of each and every person, as long as it doesn't stray too far away from the way, which is very relative and very fragile too. So
Right,
again, that's
right.
a completely separate topic.
Yeah, yeah. Because there is this lineage integrity that you have to maintain, so in one way, but also you have to do what's true for how you're manifesting and how you're expressing it. And
Yep.
if someone is noticing uh a that kind of line that we're talking about, like some sort of bridge or connection between an element of martial arts, or it, when it's boiled down to its fundamental quality, and then you take some Koyasan Shingon Buddhism and you melt down an element or it to to its essence, there can be some sort of connection, more or
Mm,
less seen. And I wanted to ask you about that. So it's Kaji Kito, is that right? The or no, sorry,
yes.
yeah. So how does that is that the fire? Yeah, the
Yep.
where,
It's a fire ceremony
and that
ritual.
and that's where that was the ritual element that your father saw a lot within the between martial arts and Shingon. Was that right?
Uh, Not so much the fire ritual. I think it's more so the kujikiri,
Oh, could
which
you?
is
Okay.
the mudras. It's probably the most common, widely understood example would be the popular anime series Naruto, where the ninjas are throwing hand signs, right? That's kujikiri basically.
Oh, I see. And there are the hand signs that are used in a ritual context during a service, and then there are, like within a martial arts sense, there are hand gestures or formations used in a combat way, or is it used in a different context within martial arts?
This is now I'm starting to make interpretation because I'm no expert in that level of depth yet. But I would say from my basic understanding, it's not so much with combat, but more so with how you set the tone of whatever you're about to do. And I guess that can open another can of talks about meditation. Everyone has different unique quirks about how they go about their meditative practices, but the goals are quite similar. It's like we're asking the same questions, but we have slightly differing answers because of the context.
Hmm.
Yeah, so I think fundamentally the hand signs are more meditative practices that are trying to align you into certain personas, characters within yourself. Say
Hmm.
if you need to calm down, say you need to fight, say you need to run, say you need to be more strategic, etc.
Yeah. And just while we just touched on it just very briefly, and if you don't mind, what are some of the quirk elements of your meditative practice, or if it's not so easily identifiable, like how do you go about in your day to day, in a more deliberate sense, go about your
Okay.
Buddhist practice? Yeah.
Okay. Well, to me, the main goal of meditation for the moment is to realign myself. Day to day, say I'll be putting on, I'd say at least 10 different hats. By hats, I mean different personas, multiple roles. Say I've got to take on the hat of a son, I've got to take on the hat of a teacher at school, I've got to take on the hat of a dojo instructor, I've got to take on the hat of X, Y, and Z. So sometimes when you're changing hats, it's not as easy as, okay, bang, I put on a new hat, boom. It's not so mechanical. I'm merely a mortal human being. So when I transition and put the hat on, it takes time for everything else to sink into that hat to optimize it. And to do that, that's where meditation comes in. I think the key aspect of it is bringing the energy back to somewhere more manageable through breathing, through mindful practices. And I think that's the two fundamental principles, the breath and the mind control. That could be done in probably, on average, I'd say 1 to 2 minutes.
Mm. And is there a certain way that you like to click in where you just kind of you just go into a room and take that space for yourself for those 1 or 2 minutes, or is it something that you can kind of do while you're cooking or while you're
Anything. I
anything?
think
Yeah,
while you're doing anything,
yeah, yeah.
that seems more applicable, especially day to day.
Mm.
Sometimes the practice of or the goal of the meditation is different. There's stuff like vipassana, say you're going away for 7 days and you need to isolate yourself from everything. I think the practice of that is far beyond recentering your energy. Of course, I think it's on the same direction, but the depth of it is far different. So it's dependent really on the goal, I think.
Yeah, yeah. I like recognizing the purpose of the level of engagement that you're going for, where like, well, right now in a day-to-day sense, I'm applying a sense of mindfulness or a sense of recalibration, realignment, so that I can better approach that next hat, or so I can
Mm.
better make sure that I can address that next thing that comes my way, however it is. But then acknowledging that, if you go on retreat, silent retreat for 7 days, or if you are in a service where you're around of more people, there's like a different level of kind of community
Mm.
based energies that you're kind of dealing with, or whatever it is. Um, do you find that you are drawn to the more like service oriented temple based practices as well, or do you find that you can kind of fill your cup with that kind of daily realignments?
That's a good question. Generally, in my recent practices or my recent day to days, I find myself just drawing myself to similar energied people. So around these people that I've more deliberately surrounded myself with, I feel like I can align my energy with that group. However, if I ask myself that same question, maybe even 5 years ago, I'd say I'll be spiraling. I'll be just chaos. And yeah, I'd say that's to keep it simple. That would be it. These days, I would be pretty in sync with the energy. Yes, there'll be some variation, but the variation is so small. There's no massive need to readjust myself that it kind of merges together.
Yeah. So the practice of kind of that realignment that you kind of do for yourself, that same kind of a similar level can be felt when you're around different energies of different people. You're finding yourself at a more of a balanced place where things don't necessarily put you at a deficit or
Hmm.
put you at a higher charge on a given
Yes.
instance. Yeah, yeah.
I
And
think that's deliberate with the people I'm around.
mm, and is that typically temple members, or does that can just be friends that you meet from work, or people that you do martial arts with, or just kind of the people in your town or community or city, anything like that?
I like to think that everyone that's in my life at the moment can all appreciate what I appreciate, whether it be, say, spirituality slash Buddhism, martial arts, youth development. Everyone kind of appreciates similar things more than less. Of course, there's a lot of differences, but more than less, we're all on the same page. So the multiple hats that I'm wearing sometimes doesn't have to be multiple hats. It's starting to become the one hat, if that makes sense. Yeah.
Yeah, all the other hats kind of fit into the bigger hat that you have, and so
Yeah. Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah.
It's quite an outfit that I'm picturing, right? But it sounds good. Yeah, it's and when it comes to like a religious engagement and things like that, and you know your father being the reverend of the temple, a founder of the temple, and someone that is kind of foundational to it, do you feel like you want to have an ordination? I don't know if you have had an ordination yet, but would you want to be ordained? Would you want to uh, one day take the responsibilities of leading a sangha? It doesn't have to be the same sangha, but just a sangha, or engaging in a leadership role in that way.
I think it's already somewhat started. Um, I do definitely, as a first and foremost, yes, I have the intention to. Um, I think the key part that I need to work on is to be more of a student. It's an interesting dynamic. So my father's 79, born in 1945 in Japan, migrated to Australia in 1978. I was born in 1997, and yet his timeline and my timeline, we're trying to sync, and we have the same goals, especially over time. And I think a key mantra is I'm trying not to be like him so much, but to seek what he was seeking. I guess to answer your question, yes, I definitely have aspirations and intentions and the practices to be wanting to lead, but I also need to be mindful that I can't fast track that too much. I must continuously embrace being a student, which I really try to, but sometimes the demands of life and the responsibilities that come by make it difficult to put on the hat of truly of a student.
Yeah, I would. I want to definitely want to ask you more about your approach, your student approach to life, and also just to the various elements of your life that you're bringing, which I think is very important and really interesting. I do also you mentioned you said something that was really touching and important. I thought, which was that you know you wanted didn't necessarily want to copy your dad's life, but you more so want to seek what he was seeking. You know,
Mm,
and I remember reading whether it was your personal website or yeah, I think it was probably most likely your personal website, but like you have this relationship with your father where the training was where you connected with him a lot the most
mm,
because there were some cultural dynamics that were different, there's generational dynamics that were different, and you know maybe some experiences that are difficult to share verbally, considering the age and considering various other circumstances. So training was something that was something that you felt
Mm,
like you could connect with. And like an inherent thing with training is like is learning, right? I mean, training is learning
yep.
and being a student. And uh, do you find that your father also approaches is like a lifelong learner, is a lifelong student, is always sharpening, training, seeing another angle, working on method in other elements of his life outside of temple leadership and also martial arts, or do you kind of see like a settledness and a confidence that that comes with like just decades
That's an
of
interesting
work?
question.
Yeah.
That's a very, very interesting question, and no doubt there'll be billions, trillions, infinite different answers that I can give you. So I'm trying to give you the most articulate and succinct answer. He always acknowledges that he doesn't know everything, and he never says one way is the best. He says, um, to him, this is what worked to him. Now, I think it's important to look at the core of this rather than the small details. I mean, if I caught him in a certain setting, he might be exhibiting or representing that of someone that knows what he's saying, and he's quite settled, as you said. Um, but the essence of it, I'd say, is he's always open to different interpretations. Now, given his age in 2024, in the current state of the world, I'd say that his settled part comes out more. But fundamentally, as a person, his soul would be someone that's curious and willing to learn. So it's also the environment that we're put in, I believe. And that's where I think the key parts of Buddhism keeps us grounded, paradoxically. Everything is reality is neutral. Everything else is what we assign our perceptions, perspectives to be.
Mm.
I
Yeah.
hope that answered your question.
It did. It did. No, yeah, because it's hard, right? It's like how do you get inside the mind of a master, and how do you become how does someone become a master? Well, it's kind of this unquenchable curiosity that decades and decades of practice gets into. And yeah, let's say you're a carpenter and you're just beginning, but you're very, very curious about wood grain. You're very curious about
Mm.
cuts and sawing and all the various things. I do not know anything about carpenting. But let's say that I did, and I'm really good at this metaphor. And so that you have all this different wood and these different kind of ways of going about addressing and making the various things that a carpenter can make. And the attention to detail, there can always be an enthusiasm or like a freshness to that what they're making in that moment, and that moment's never happened before, so you can't master that moment, so you're always learning from that moment. But at the same time, if you've been a carpenter for a couple decades, you definitely know how to make a table, and you could probably make a table pretty well. Yes.
Yep.
So,
Yep.
but you hadn't made that table yet, and so
Yeah, it's a
there.
new table each time.
Yeah, yeah. So, anyway, yeah, so I appreciate you kind of helping me understand like that both settled, but also that soul. Like I think that rings very true. Like there's like a soul that um like thing that kind of makes people curious and makes people want to delight in something, a little bit more.
Yep.
No, that's amazing. And then so as far as your way of going about things as a student, is there a certain arena recently in your life that you felt that you've been really feeling the student role? Like, is there, oh, well, I'm shifting this approach towards education, and this is where I feel like I'm really a student. I know that we talked about this shift in perspective as far as like matching, seeing life as matching. Is this kind of
Mhm.
where you see yourself as a student the most right now, or is there something else that where you're finding yourself approaching things as a novice or someone new?
I think if we're talking about meta, I think I am a student in being a student. Sorry, that doesn't really help. The meta is how. this mantra I really enjoy is how you do anything is how you do everything. So if I can't be a student at being a student, I cannot be a student in anything else.
Mm.
So I need to be a student to myself first, that I myself don't know myself fully. Um, therefore, that mentality will apply to everything else. Like we're talking about with how we stand, how we breathe, all of that is definitely connected. And it takes a lot of practice to be able to consistently partake in that practice without getting lost in this massive amounts of information.
Yeah. I come at things. I've been developing like a Zen practice within the past couple of years, and there's this idea that you can bring what's happening on the cushion into your daily life and into doing the dishes and various things like that. And it is so easy for me to turn off the the learning part of my brain and just kind of trudge through dishes or not just kind of shove something into the recycling bin very like very not delicately or anything like that. um but every time I do it, I'm aware of myself enough to know that I'm doing a shortcut. And
I,
there's always this part of me
I
that's
love that.
like,
I love
you
that.
know did you just do a shortcut? It's like, yeah, I'm tired, can I have a shortcut? It's like, you can have a shortcut, but you did do a shortcut. So that what you're saying resonates with me as far as like being a student of being a student, where it's like, how do you approach something that you know how to brush your teeth? You ought to. You've been doing it for decades. Like, you know how to do this, but you haven't done it today yet. Now,
Like the carpenter analogy with with making a table. You
yeah,
haven't made this table yet. Yes, you
yeah,
made 50 others in the last 5 years, but you haven't made this one.
yeah.
Yes. Yeah. And I think that comes down to the root essence. What is the root essence? And it comes down to how can we continuously optimize how we think? How can we continuously optimize how we breathe, how we eat? And then we can appreciate the finer little details, like how we put down the recycling bin or how we wash the dishes. Until we see it and get to that point where we can never unsee it, we will always kind of just, oh yeah, this is somewhat trivial in trivial activities.
Right. Yeah, and so when you kind of go about your life, like as far as like routine and discipline, like do you find that discipline is something that you especially from like a martial arts background, is that something that kind of helps you keep in check with things? And how do you keep yourself disciplined for having that kind of clarity and focus in your life to perceive yourself as a student?
Wow, there's a lot of layers there. I think the fundamental is understanding discipline itself and being able to practice it. And I think the key is understanding. I don't know if you're familiar with Anderson and Krathwohl's revised Bloom's taxonomy. It's this pyramid, and it talks about the hierarchy of the levels in depth in thinking. The lowest end is called remembering, and then it's understanding, and then these more complex ones, and the peak of it is creation. So if we don't understand, we can't do anything above that. Everything else would just be lacking fundamentals and we'll be resorting to shortcuts. So I think understanding underpins that. And I'm trying to actually, ironically, understand your question again.
Yeah, right.
Um, discipline, I think, to understand discipline, it's to understand fundamentally that how you feel does not really matter. And that goes down to one of the key principles of Shingon Buddhism. It's emptiness. And people think emptiness, oh, that sounds very depressing and dark, nihilistic, but emptiness is just in its raw state. A cup can be empty, and you don't have to think, oh, there's nothing to drink, I'm thirsty. That's your interpretation or your circumstances. The cup is just empty. You can think of it as, oh, I can put water in. I'm not trying to be like Bruce Lee, by the way. Um, yeah, so discipline is not how you feel. That's more motivation. If you can continuously do what you need to do every day, regardless of how you feel, that is discipline. If you can appreciate that and understand that, you can now scale that discipline into something that has a goal that is in alignment with your goals and values.
Yeah. That that is a very I like hearing about how discipline isn't about how you feel, and that very much rings true because the discipline of waking up early and going for a run or something, it doesn't matter how you feel. Like you've tasked yourself with the mental goal of showing up for yourself every day and going for that run, whether it's dark at 6 a.m. or not, depending on the season. You told yourself that you would do this every day, and boy, is it hard to get out of the
Mm,
bed.
of
Some
course,
when
of
it's dark
course.
outside still. Oh man, get out of town. But there's that there's this kind of ringing alarm in your mind, like not necessarily like a danger alarm, but just kind of like this like get up and get going alarm too,
Yes.
that sometimes loses, but sometimes it wins, and sometimes that's the very thing that kind of gets you out and do it. And then you're usually rewarded. I feel honestly rewarded when I get up and act upon that impulse.
Mm,
What is there something that you tell yourself when you're uh this is a visual example that can apply to whatever it is that you do, but like you're
hmm
under the covers, it's cold outside, you don't feel like getting up. Like what do you tell
hmm
yourself to give you that little extra boost if you can muster that energy? What do you tell yourself to get
Okay.
out of bed?
Well, and this is my own personal thing that I'm trying to work on. For me, it's always been the shackles of the should, meaning I have not achieved what I want to achieve, therefore I must get up. I need to be like, oh, no, sorry, I should be like this. I should be achieving my goal soon. And I'm very much living in the past or the future, which is actually very un-Buddhist like. That's my own practice I'm trying to work towards. Okay, today I've got 20, 30 things I've got to do today. I must get up now. And I get up. But unfortunately, I'm finding that over time, that's not a very sustainable long-term uh, self-practice.
Mm,
It's something is burning out inside with that practice. So I'd much rather take the practice of the glass half full. There is something to learn today. There is something positive out there today to help me get up rather than, oh, I didn't do that in the past, or I didn't do that yesterday, or I failed miserably, or I took a shortcut. Therefore, I must wake up today. I'm trying to work on shifting that practice. And I think it comes down to how I view myself. And I think the answers lie personally in the childhood. Where did I start? Why or who did I start? Who helped me get to that practice of I must get to that stage?
mm.
And I think that onus is on me to change if I want to help others in how I helped myself. If I can't help myself, I cannot help anyone.
Yeah,
Long term, long term.
right. That I think that distinction between the shackles of the should and this kind of more half full, glasses half full approach is really wonderful because yeah, there is this burnout you can get from feeling like you're always late or
Mm,
feeling like
mm,
feeling like you're late, that lights a fire under you, and then you go and you do the thing, and then, but if you're late every day, if so to speak, like if you're not hitting most of your to-do list in a day, then you can kick yourself and all that kind of stuff. Eventually you'll burn out or whatever it is, and or maybe it'll have a negative, it put a bitterness or a negativeness in your own self-image or in your own kind
yes.
of sense of security and self-esteem. Whereas kind of appreciating every morning, like, oh, I have an opportunity. Wake up with an opportunity. Like I can do something that I like today, or someone is counting on me, and how wonderful of an opportunity that I get to deliver on that today, however it is. Yeah, I think that's a much more healthy way. And then yeah, like just like how we talked about with making sure your feet are in alignment. If you wake up in alignment, and if you kind of approach life like that, then it pays dividends in the way that you interact with others.
Mm,
Wow. Yeah. I'm glad that this is something that you're incorporating into your morning routine, or just like in general with the way that you are approaching or drift, departing from that shackles of shouldness. And like there is like in the workout community, which I'm clearly a part of because I called it the workout community. I don't know what the gym, I don't know what people call the exercise life, but the there is this idea of like, what is it? Um, embracing the suck or something like that, where
Wow, there's
you
no
know
way you
that.
just said that. That's
Oh yeah.
crazy. We've had having this discussion a lot recently with some of my students. That's literally the term embracing the suck.
Oh wow.
And there's no coincidence you said that. It's crazy. Anyway, sorry, go on.
Oh yeah, I mean, well, I'm curious like what your discussions have been like, but basically like there is this. Well, I guess we can discuss it too, but there is a negativity to it, right? Because it sucks. There's something that sucks, and then there's this embrace the suck. Well, does embracing the suck mean that you are actively then re-perceiving something that is not fun and enjoying it as a not fun thing, and then by enjoying it, it's no longer not fun? Or is it kind of like get over yourself, wake up, take the covers off? It doesn't matter if you're cold or not, discipline and
Mm,
move on. So I was, well, what I just said, but also I'm curious what people are talking about in your community.
I think the overarching question, so you don't get lost in the details, as it's very easy to get lost in the details, is what is your why? Like, why should you embrace the suck? If you don't have a good why and you're not happy with your reason why, you'll be questioning yourself and challenging the point of the exercise. But when the why is so clear and articulate, as clear as, the North Star in the North Pole, until it's that clear, I think there will be always negotiation, rooms for negotiation. And I think that's where articulation, visibility, explicitity, bleh, being explicit is very important. So you know why you need to get up that day. So the how, getting up at say 5 a.m. or whatnot, or brushing your teeth for 2 minutes, those hows become, of course, they're relevant, but not the driving force of the narrative of your emotions.
Yeah, that is really important to remember. Yeah, because like I can all of a sudden, you know, vaguely want to run a marathon. Then I set myself up for like all of these like tasks that I have to do that. But like, do I really want to do the marathon in the first place? Um, and you gotta know, right? You gotta know before you start training if it's something that you really want to do. You can't just be running 12 miles a day and just be like, you know what? Why am I doing this? And
But that's okay too.
yes, yes,
That's okay. Maybe that's how you start. Who knows?
right. Or that's how it's like, well, if I've been running 12 miles, off and on for this long training for a marathon, maybe I don't want to run a marathon, but I know that I can show up for myself at 4 a.m. to do this before I
Mm,
go to work. So what do I want to do with that kind of drive?
mm,
And then maybe,
precisely.
yeah, maybe it won't be that hard. Uh, and just on that note, like just when it comes to portioning out your day and prioritizing things, do you find that you make time for working, making sure that your body is healthy and moving and exercising, and then also how do you do your creative work? Like how, like I'm just curious about your creative process in tandem with martial arts, and how you go about maintaining your exercise routine.
I'd like to try to start my day off with the tone of the day. There's that um, axiom, oh, you woke up on the wrong side of the bed. If
Mm.
you wake up on the wrong side of the bed, that's going to set the narrative for the rest of the day. Of course, not 100%, but it sets the tone of it. So whatever I start off in the morning, I try to optimize the tone. Um, Now, in terms of, I guess, how do I navigate through the day, I'd say that's fundamentally intuitive. I try not to, I mean, I do think a lot, but I try not to think too much. I try to base it off a feeling. And in my more naive younger days, that feeling was mostly wrong. it led to problems. But as I get older and I become more deliberate and set the focus, my focus is on optimizing this. My intuitions become more correct. So I guess at the end of the day, it's, well, what are you focusing on, and what genuinely are you trying to focus on? For me, I'm trying to optimize juggling multiple hats.
Hmm.
So as my goal is that, I'm noticing that those goals are actually being met.
Nice. Well, that's so that you're uh by sustaining these multiple elements of your life and attending to that balancing act, like overall, that therefore you're able to act, execute, or however you phrase it, for fulfill those elements of your life because of
Mm.
the task of the greater balancing. Um, that's yeah, I really like that a lot. And you are a very creative person, especially with writing. And I know that it seems like poetry is something that you are expressive in, and that you work in. And then also too, you are a reader and you like to engage with text. And I don't know if you like to do long form text, but I was curious if you are interested in one day writing a book, if you read a book, or if you have written a book already, or if there's any kind of interest in whether it's like a poetry collection or it's a long form writing project. I was just curious what if there's anything coming up.
There is, again, going back to that terminal objective, the big, big, big life goal. I'd say, yeah, one of the enabling objectives, one of the smaller components to fulfilling this big goal is writing a book, publishing a book. I would love to do that one day. Um, I don't feel like it will happen anytime soon. Again, going back to the intuition, but I do feel one day it will happen.
Mm-mm. Would it be? I mean, I know that it feels like it's something that is far off, but do you think that it would be like a work of fiction, or do you think that it'd be a work in reflection, like a memoir, or do you think that it would be something else, or you just like let's leave it open for now?
I feel like let's leave it open now because it will be writing to an audience and it would be dependent on the audience at the time. If we were having this conversation right now in, say, the 80s or 70s, would we even be having this conversation now in 70s or 80s? So it will be dependent on what will be happening thereabouts at the time I'm committing to write, I think.
Yeah,
Not saying that I'm grossly impressionable to what's happening around the world at the time, but we live in a world with others, so I do need to be mindful of the others around me. I don't want to be this lone voice that is yelling and talking out of sync to what's happening around the world.
yeah, yeah. I like that. Where if you have a message, it's important to know what the message is and all that, but it's also important to be able to communicate that message, and you have to know what the
Mm,
audience that you are going to be talking to is, or if in whatever time in the future people are more interested in self-reflective memoir writing, and that is the best way that you can communicate your message, then that's the outlet for it. But if a fiction piece, or if a short piece or whatever it is the best to kind of get your message across to those readers or to those listeners or whatever it is, then that's the method to do it.
mm.
um, well, this has been such a wonderful conversation, and there's so many kind of takeaways and so many kind of encouraging things that I've been learning from our discussion. And I did have one more question that's a little bit more open, which is that uh,
Oh,
I wanted to know if there's anything that you would want to promote, whether it's like a cause or a foundation, something that you're working on, something that you heard about someone else working on that you want to get more ears and eyes on, or if there is anything like advice wise that you'd want to share with somebody that is at any point of the Buddhist path, that you would have wanted to have heard when you were kind of coming along.
good question or good stimulus. I think the main, most important parting words I would say is don't give up. Don't give up. The answers will come along the way. Don't give up. Just keep going with what if you really decided to do something, stick with it, and over time the answers will come.
Mm. Yeah, and especially when it comes to the that matching uh way of perceiving the world where, if you have all those cards laid out in front of you and you keep turning the cards, eventually, a match will appear, something
Mm,
will come up. Um, no, that's wonderful advice. And and yeah, I mean, and look what it can do. Look what it can do. The more that you allow yourself to, uh, well, to suffer and to go through it, but also when you do that, there are opportunities for you to have change and to further yourself along in your interests. Well, Harrison, thank you so much for speaking with me today. I really appreciate you
oh,
taking the
thank you.
time, and this has been such a wonderful conversation and very meaningful. I feel like the that matching uh, way of perceiving the world. I know that's something that you're introducing into your life, and I think that I can get something from that, and also to just our conversation specifically about discipline. That was very encouraging to me, and it'll I'm sure influence me and hopefully who anyone else that's listening in very positive and beneficial ways. But yeah, I'm excited to see what's coming up next for you, uh, and wishing you the best as you kind of reach the tail end of your winter. Is that right? You're almost done with your winter now?
Yeah, it's already spring now. It feels very warm.
Oh, nice. Okay, well there you go.
Yeah,
Well, I wish you a wonderful spring and hope to connect another time soon.
likewise, Vincent. Thank you.